Captain Jack Riley loved the midnight shift. The flight from Honolulu to Los Angeles was long, a 6-hour stretch over the black, featureless expanse of the Pacific Ocean. While most passengers slept, cocooned in the dim, quiet cabin, the cockpit became a sanctuary. Tonight, the sky was perfectly clear, a vast, star-dusted canvas. His co-pilot, a young and eager officer named Mike, was handling the comms, leaving Jack to enjoy the quiet majesty of the flight. They were 3 hours out from LAX, cruising at 35,000 feet, when Jack saw the first anomaly. It wasn't on any instrument. It was outside, against the backdrop of stars. A flicker of movement, a shadow that blotted out a section of the Milky Way for a fraction of a second. He blinked, attributing it to fatigue. But then he saw it again. This time, it was clearer. A shape, long, dark, and boomerang-like, moving silently and with impossible speed. It wasn't a satellite or another aircraft. It had no lights, no vapor trail, nothing to indicate it was a product of human engineering. "Cap, you see that? 9 o'clock high." Mike leaned forward, squinting into the darkness. "See what, Cap?" And then, as if on cue, the sky filled with them. Dozens of them. A silent, perfectly synchronized fleet of the same dark boomerang-shaped objects emerging from the thin cloud layer below. They moved as one, a vast phalanx of shadows against the starlight, maintaining a strict formation that would be the envy of any military air squadron. They were colossal, each one easily the size of a commercial airliner, yet they made no sound and left no trace on their radar. "Oh my God," Mike whispered, his voice trembling. "What are they?" Jack was frozen, his hands gripping the yoke. In all his years of flying, through storms, engine failures, and military airspace, he had never seen anything like this. It was majestic and terrifying. It felt ancient, purposeful, and utterly alien. He instinctively reached for the comms button to report the sighting to air traffic control, but a strange reluctance stayed his hand. A deep, primal part of his brain was screaming that what he was seeing was not meant to be seen, that to acknowledge it, to give it a voice, was to invite a kind of trouble he couldn't begin to comprehend. The ghost fleet passed them, maintaining its silent, inexorable course towards the east, towards the American coastline. In less than a minute, they were gone, disappearing into the darkness as silently as they had arrived, leaving behind only 2 stunned pilots and a sky that suddenly felt vast, empty, and menacing. Back on the ground in Los Angeles, Jack couldn't shake what he had seen. He tried to explain it to the airline's dispatch, but his report was met with polite skepticism and concerned glances. "Captain Riley, are you feeling all right? Perhaps you should take some time off." The official report filed by the airline simply noted a possible visual anomaly and suggested it might have been unusual cloud formations or a meteor shower, despite the perfectly clear sky and the distinct structured formation of the objects. Days turned into weeks, and Jack found himself increasingly isolated. Mike, his co-pilot, had been subtly pressured by the airline to downplay the incident, suggesting they both might have been tired or seen something misinterpreted. The other pilots listened to Jack's account with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disbelief. Then came the visit. 2 men in identical, dark, unremarkable suits appeared at Jack's door. They showed him no identification, but carried an air of quiet authority that spoke volumes. They knew details about his flight, his career, his family. Their message was clear. What he thought he saw, he didn't see. What he experienced didn't happen. For the sake of his career, his reputation, and the national interest, it was best to forget the entire incident. They presented him with a document, a non-disclosure agreement that was both legally binding and implicitly threatening. It spoke of national security, classified information, and the severe consequences of unauthorized disclosure. Jack, feeling the weight of their veiled threats, reluctantly signed. But the image of the ghost fleet remained burned into his mind. He started spending his off-duty hours researching aviation incidents, unexplained aerial phenomena, anything that might shed light on what he had witnessed. He found scattered reports, grainy photographs, and whispered rumors of similar sightings over the Pacific, often dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications. One name kept appearing in his searches: Frank Miller, a former air traffic controller who had been mysteriously fired years ago after claiming to have tracked unusual, high-speed objects over his radar over the Malibu sector. Miller had become a pariah in the aviation community, his career ruined by his insistence on what he had seen. Jack knew he had to find him. Miller was the only person who might understand what he had experienced and might hold a piece of the puzzle. His search led him to a small, cluttered apartment in a rundown part of Long Beach, a place where the ghosts of forgotten careers and unanswered questions seemed to linger in the salty air. Frank Miller's apartment was a shrine to his lost career. Radar screens, old flight maps, and stacks of meticulously annotated logs filled every available surface. He was a man haunted by what he had seen, his eyes holding a mixture of bitterness and vindication. Initially, Miller was wary of Jack, another pilot likely sent by the airline or the authorities to discredit him further. But when Jack described the silent boomerang-shaped fleet, a spark of recognition ignited in Miller's eyes. "Boomerangs," Miller rasped, his voice hoarse from years of shouting over radio static that now existed only in his memory. They moved like nothing I'd ever tracked. Mach speeds, zero sonic boom. They'd appear out of nowhere, dance around for a bit, then vanish, and always over the same damn patch of ocean. Miller pulled out a faded chart of the Pacific, his finger tracing a line to an area roughly 50 miles west of Malibu. "This," he said, tapping a circled area marked with his own frantic notes, "this is where they always seem to congregate. I called it the Anomaly Zone." He recounted his experiences, the initial disbelief from his superiors, the increasing pressure to explain away the anomalies, and finally, the sudden dismissal for professional incompetence. His career was over, his reputation shattered. "They said it was equipment malfunction," he scoffed. "But I know what I saw, just like you know what you saw, and they don't want us talking about it." Jack felt a surge of validation. He wasn't crazy. There was someone else who had witnessed something similar, and he had paid a heavy price for it. "Did you ever figure out what they were doing there?" Jack asked, pointing to the circled area on the map. Miller shook his head. "Never got close. They'd just disappear. Sometimes they'd dive straight down, faster than any submarine. Other times they'd just blink out of existence, like they were going somewhere. Or nowhere." As they talked, Miller mentioned a young hacker he had briefly connected with online, a kid fascinated by satellite tracking and open-source intelligence. This hacker, a guy who went by the handle Skywatcher, had claimed to have picked up unusual satellite activity over the anomaly zone around the same times as Miller's radar contacts. Miller had lost touch with him, but the name sparked a new lead for Jack. If official channels were closed to them, maybe they could find answers in the digital shadows, among those who looked at the skies with an open mind and a healthy dose of suspicion. The ghost fleet was out there, and someone, somewhere, knew more about it. Their search for the truth had just begun, taking them from the sterile denials of the authorities to the murky world of underground intelligence.
Finding Skywatcher proved easier than they anticipated. Miller remembered a few online forums where the young hacker had been active. After a couple of hours navigating the labyrinthine corners of the internet, Jack managed to track him down. His real name was Alex Chen, a college student with a knack for code and a fascination with the unexplained. Initially, Alex was skeptical of Jack's story. He'd heard plenty of outlandish UFO tales online. But when Jack mentioned Frank Miller and the boomerang shapes, Alex's tone shifted. He remembered Miller's posts from years ago, the air traffic controller's frustrated attempts to be heard. After a cautious online exchange, they agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop in Pasadena. Alex was a bright, energetic young man with a nervous energy that hinted at the long nights he spent staring at computer screens. He brought with him a laptop filled with data. "Mr. Riley," Alex said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Mr. Miller wasn't crazy. I've been tracking satellite activity over that region for years. There are anomalies. He pulled up a series of thermal imaging scans. Several times a year, coinciding almost exactly with Miller's radar contacts and now Jack's sighting, a series of faint, fast-moving heat signatures would appear over the Pacific, heading directly towards Miller's anomaly zone. These signatures didn't match any known aircraft or spacecraft. And get this, Alex continued, switching to another set of data. I've also picked up unusual electromagnetic pulses emanating from the same underwater coordinates. They're short bursts, almost like signals. He showed them a map with a cluster of pinpoint locations marked off the coast of Malibu. This is where the heat signatures disappear and where the electromagnetic pulses seem to originate. It's deep ocean territory. There's nothing officially there. Alex also revealed something even more intriguing. By analyzing publicly available flight tracking data and cross-referencing it with his satellite information, he had noticed a pattern. On the same night each year that the Ghost Fleet appeared, there was a significant increase in military air and naval activity in the area, often disguised as training exercises. It was as if the U.S. military knew the fleet was coming. They're not intercepting them, he explained, his voice hushed. They're observing, waiting. The pieces were starting to fall into place. A recurring, silent fleet of unknown aircraft, a hidden underwater location, unusual energy signals, and a consistent, almost ritualistic military response. The Malibu Anomaly wasn't just a point on the map. It was the epicenter of a mystery far larger and more complex than Jack had ever imagined, and they were now on the edge of uncovering it. Armed with Alex's data, Jack and Frank decided their next step was to get closer to the anomaly zone. They couldn't go by air without raising suspicion, and official vessels were out of question. Their only option was to charter a private boat, one whose owner asked few questions. They found a weathered fishing trawler in San Pedro, captained by a grizzled old seaman named Sal, who claimed to have seen all sorts of weird things out on the water in his 50 years at sea. He didn't pry into their reasons for wanting to be near the restricted naval zone off Malibu, accepting their vague story about researching fishing patterns. As they sailed towards the coordinates Alex had provided, the mood on board was tense with anticipation. The ocean was vast and indifferent, its surface giving no hint of what lay beneath. Frank, surprisingly spry despite his years, spent hours poring over nautical charts, muttering about currents and depths. Alex, connected to a satellite internet link, constantly monitored for any unusual air or sea traffic. On the third night, as they reached the edge of the anomaly zone, their instruments started to act erratically. The boat's compass spun wildly, and their radio crackled with static. Alex's laptop flickered, displaying garbled data. Even Sal, a man who had seen his share of rough seas, looked uneasy. "Something ain't right here," he grumbled, his eyes scanning the empty horizon. "Feels like we're in a dead spot." Suddenly, the water around them began to glow with a faint, ethereal blue light. It wasn't bioluminescence, it was a more structured, almost artificial glow that pulsed gently. Then they heard it, a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the hull of the boat, similar to what Captain Riley had described hearing during his encounter, but deeper, more profound. On the sonar, instead of the expected flat seabed, a series of massive, indistinct shapes began to appear, too large and too geometrically regular to be natural formations. They were structures, a city perhaps, or something far stranger. As the humming intensified, Jack felt the familiar sensation, a fleeting image flashing through his mind. Dark, boomerang-shaped objects descending into the glowing water. This time, however, there was something more. He saw the objects entering a colossal, submerged structure that seemed to open up to receive them, like a hidden hangar in the depths of the ocean. The vision was brief, but clear enough to send a jolt of realization through him. The ghost fleet wasn't just passing by. They were going somewhere, to a hidden base, an underwater port, and it was located right here, beneath the waves of the Malibu Anomaly. The silence of the Pacific held a secret far more profound than they could have ever imagined. The glowing subsided as quickly as it had appeared, leaving the ocean's surface dark and still once more. But the image of the submerged structure, the feeling of the resonant hum remained vivid. They knew they had to get a closer look. Captain Sal, despite his apprehension, agreed to anchor the boat a safe distance from the center of the anomaly zone. Using their own small inflatable dinghy and a basic underwater drone equipped with a camera, Jack and Alex prepared for a preliminary investigation. Frank, his sea legs not quite what they used to be, insisted on staying aboard to monitor the sonar. As the dinghy bobbed on the dark water, the air felt thick with anticipation. Alex prepped the drone, its camera lens gleaming in the moonlight. "Just a quick scan," he said, his voice a little shaky. "See if we can get any visual confirmation." They lowered the drone into the inky depths. The feed on Alex's laptop was initially filled with blackness, punctuated by the occasional fleck of sediment. Then, slowly, the beam of the drone's light cut through the gloom. The seabed was unlike anything they had ever seen. Instead of sand and rock, it was composed of vast, smooth plates that seemed almost artificial. And then, the structures began to appear. Colossal walls rose from the darkness, their surfaces marked with strange geometric patterns that echoed the faint markings Jack had glimpsed on the boomerang craft. The scale was immense, the architecture alien and breathtaking. As the drone ventured further, it approached a section of the seabed where a massive, dark opening was visible, easily large enough to swallow a commercial airliner whole. The edges of the opening were perfectly smooth, as if cut by an impossibly precise laser. Suddenly, the drone's camera feed flickered violently, and the signal cut out. "What happened?" Jack exclaimed, leaning over Alex's laptop. "I don't know," Alex said, frantically typing on his keyboard. "Signal lost. It just died." A wave of unease washed over them. It was as if their attempt to peer into the underwater world had been met with resistance. Back on the trawler, Frank's voice crackled over the radio. "Something big just moved on the sonar, right where you sent the drone. It's enormous." Whatever was down there was aware of their presence. Their reconnaissance had been detected, and the silence of the Malibu Anomaly suddenly felt far more threatening than before. The ghost fleet had a home, and that home was guarded. The loss of the drone hung heavy in the air. They retrieved the silent, unblinking device from the water, its camera and sensors inexplicably dead. Frank's sonar continued to register large, unidentifiable masses moving below, their movements too fluid and too intelligent seeming to be natural. Driven by a need to see for themselves, Jack decided they had to dive. They had brought scuba gear for just such an eventuality, though none of them had anticipated encountering something on this scale. Alex, despite his apprehension, insisted on going with him, his curiosity overriding his fear. Frank, his aging body not quite up to a deep dive in potentially hostile territory, remained on the boat. Donning their gear, Jack and Alex slipped into the cold, black water. Descending slowly, their powerful dive lights pierced the darkness. The silence was profound, broken only by the hiss of their regulators and the distant hum that seemed to resonate in their very bones. As they reached a depth of around 200 feet, the smooth, artificial-looking seabed came into view. The colossal walls of the submerged structure loomed before them, their surfaces marked with strange geometric script that echoed the faint markings Jack had glimpsed on the boomerang craft. The scale was immense, the architecture alien and breathtaking. As they reached a depth of around 200 feet, the smooth, artificial-looking seabed came into view. The colossal walls of the submerged structure loomed before them, their surfaces marked with strange...
Back on the surface, Frank's anxiety was palpable.
The extended time Jack and Alex had been underwater, coupled with the continued strange readings on the sonar, had put him on edge. He kept scanning the horizon, half expecting to see a fleet of black helicopters descending upon them. As Jack and Alex clambered back aboard the Salty Dog, their faces were a mixture of wonder and apprehension. They recounted the visions, the scale of the underwater base, and the clear indication that they had stumbled upon a significant alien presence. "We need to get this out there," Alex said, his voice filled with urgency. "The world needs to know." Jack hesitated. The silent warning from the men in black still echoed in his mind. "It's not that simple, Alex. They didn't want us to see this. They'll come after us." Their debate was interrupted by a sudden, sharp ping from the sonar, unlike anything Frank had heard before. It was a focused, almost deliberate signal originating from directly beneath them. Before they could react, the water beside the boat erupted. A dark, sleek object breached the surface, silent and menacing. It was boomerang-shaped, identical to the craft Jack had seen in the sky, but smaller, like a scout vessel. It hovered a few feet above the water, its dark surface absorbing the moonlight. A low, almost inaudible hum emanated from the craft. Then a beam of blue light, like a concentrated laser, scanned the Salty Dog, lingering for a moment on each of them. Fear gripped them. They were no longer just observers. They had been observed. Their intrusion had been noted. The scout craft tilted slightly, and a section on its underside opened, revealing a dark, circular aperture. A low, resonant tone filled the air, and Jack felt the same tingling sensation he had experienced during his dives, but stronger this time. Fragmented images flooded his mind. The slender beings, their large eyes filled with what seemed like curiosity and a hint of concern, and a clear directive: leave. The message was unmistakable. They had crossed a line. They were uninvited guests in a place they were not meant to be. The scout craft remained hovering for a moment longer, as if waiting for acknowledgement. Then, with a sudden, silent acceleration, it shot back down into the water, disappearing beneath the waves without a trace. The only evidence of its presence was the lingering hum in the air and the profound sense that they had just received a direct communication from an alien intelligence. The secret of the Malibu Anomaly was far from passive. It was actively guarding itself. The encounter with the scout craft left them shaken, but with a newfound clarity. The beings were aware of them and communicated a clear message. Continuing their investigation in such a direct manner was not only dangerous, but also disrespectful to a potentially peaceful, albeit hidden, civilization. They decided to heed the warning. Captain Sal turned the Salty Dog around, heading back towards the California coast. The silence on board was heavy with the weight of what they now knew. The ghost fleet wasn't just a mysterious phenomenon, it was a recurring journey to a hidden underwater home. The Malibu Anomaly was real, and it housed an intelligent, technologically advanced species. As they sailed away, Alex, ever the data analyst, reviewed the sensor logs from their time near the anomaly zone. He noticed a recurring pattern in the faint electromagnetic pulses they had detected, a complex sequence that he initially dismissed as random noise. But now, in the context of their encounter, he began to see a structure, a potential language. As he sailed away, Alex, ever the data analyst, reviewed the sensor logs from their time near the anomaly zone. He noticed a recurring pattern in the faint electromagnetic pulses they had detected, a complex sequence that he initially dismissed as random noise. But now, in the context of their encounter, he began to see a structure, a potential language. As he sailed away, Alex, ever the data analyst, reviewed the sensor logs from their time near the anomaly zone. he noticed a recurring pattern in the faint electromagnetic pulses they had detected, a complex sequence that he initially dismissed as random noise. But now, in the context of their encounter, he began to see a structure, a potential language. In his makeshift lab in his Pasadena apartment, Alex dedicated himself to deciphering the pulses. He used advanced algorithms and linguistic analysis techniques, cross-referencing patterns with known mathematical sequences and even ancient Earth languages. Days turned into sleepless nights as he pored over the data. Meanwhile, Jack and Frank wrestled with what they should do with their incredible discovery. The government's reaction was a stark reminder of the forces that wanted this secret kept. Public disclosure would likely lead to panic, military intervention, and potentially jeopardize any chance of peaceful contact in the future. One evening, Alex burst into Jack's apartment, his eyes wide with excitement. I think I've found something," he stammered, holding up his laptop. "The pulses, they repeat certain sequences, and these sequences, they match astronomical data." He showed them a complex chart correlating the electromagnetic pulses with the orbits of distant stars, including systems light years away. It was as if the beings were broadcasting a message, not to Earth perhaps, but to others in the vast cosmic neighborhood, a beacon, or perhaps a homing signal. The realization hit them. The Ghost Fleet's annual appearance might not just be a routine visit to a hidden base. It could be part of a much larger cosmic interaction, a journey across interstellar distances. Their small boat had stumbled upon a cosmic highway, and they were now privy to a secret that spanned galaxies. They never went public with their findings. The risks were too great, the potential consequences too unpredictable. Instead, they chose a different path, a quiet form of observation, hoping to learn more without interference. Alex continued to monitor the electromagnetic pulses, refining his analysis, slowly building a rudimentary understanding of their structure. Jack, having officially retired from flying, dedicated his time to studying astronomy and astrophysics, trying to decipher the celestial references in the alien signals. Frank, drawing on his years of experience on the sea, kept an eye on maritime activity in the Pacific, noting any unusual patterns. The annual appearance of the Ghost Fleet became their silent vigil. Each year, on the same night, they would gather near the coast, their eyes fixed on the horizon, watching the silent, dark shapes pass overhead, heading towards the hidden depths. They never tried to approach them again, respecting the clear warning they had received. Over time, Alex managed to correlate certain pulse sequences with specific astronomical events: distant supernovae, the alignment of galaxies, the passage of comets through far-off systems. It became clear that the signals were not just a beacon, they were a form of cosmic cartography, a way for the beings to navigate the vast distances of space. They never learned where the Ghost Fleet originated or what their ultimate purpose was on Earth. The city beneath the Malibu Anomaly remained a secret, a silent testament to a presence beyond human comprehension. But they knew it was there, a hidden doorway to a larger universe. And sometimes, on clear nights, as they looked up at the star-dusted sky over the Pacific, they would imagine the silent fleet traversing the light years, following pathways charted by those mysterious pulses. They had glimpsed a reality far grander than their own, a cosmic tapestry woven with threads of silence and shadow. Their adventure had not brought them fame or fortune, but something far more profound: the humbling understanding that humanity was just one small part of a vast and wondrous cosmos, and that some paths were best left unseen, their secrets held safely within the depths. The Ghost Fleet continued its silent journey, a yearly reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond the horizon, both in the skies above and in the hidden depths below.